Monitor event logs. In this nugget, we're going to be talking about monitoring the event log. We'll start off with just an overview of the event log and look at some old tried and true friends from the past, such as the application event log, security event log, and so forth. We'll also take a look at applications and services, which is a new node within Windows Server 2008, which gives us pretty good detailed information about a lot of our key applications and services there, including, for example, the DNS Logs, which is an exam objective. You just need to know where that's located and the fact that gives you additional information, and then I'll show you some examples of the DNS logs as well. And then I'll show you how to create custom views. One of the biggest problems with event logging is sometimes you just can't see the forest for the trees. There's so many details in the event logs that you really sometimes want to filter it out to only show you the important stuff. I'll show you how to do that. Also, I'm going to show you how to create subscriptions, which are also known as event forwarding, which allows us to take the events on one computer and forward them to another so that you can kind of consolidate all of the events onto a single workstation, for example, so that you don't have to visit each individual machine separately. You know, if something's important to you, normally you want to keep track of it, don't you? That's why many of us keep daily track of our checkbook balances or how our investments are going. Hopefully they're going up these days instead of down. Many of us have people that we care about. I remember when I was in college, I had a girlfriend, cared a great deal about her. Always wanted to know where she was going, who she was talking to, why she was talking to him, how far she would drive when she went to the grocery store. Was it really the 2.3 miles like she said, or was it the 7.8 miles that I found on the odometer of her car? Of course, she didn't like all that stuff too much, so then, of course, there was the inevitable breakup, and then the restraining order, and things kind of deteriorated from there. It's getting kind of creepy in here, isn't it? Well, anyway, of course, I'm just joking about all of those things, mostly. But anyway, one of the things that we want to do is keep track of things that are important to us, don't we? And one of those things that we want to keep track of here is, of course, what's going on your computer. We use the event viewer to be able to do that. So let's go ahead and take a look at some information about these event logs. First of all, there's our generic Windows logs. These are the same logs you've probably seen in previous versions of Windows. Nothing too new about most of this. But if you take a look at it, it's a component of Server Manager now that appears under Diagnostics. And in the Windows logs, you have application logs, which relates to certain functions of your applications that run on the operating system. Could be default apps that run within Windows or executables, or it could be something that you've installed. I'll also show you if an application is hung or has caused some kind of a problem. Then you'll also see certain security items, and let's just click on an application and see as an example. Okay, here's a good example of the application event log. It did not activate this version of Windows, and that's because I usually don't activate until the very last moment. That way, if I've activated a copy of Windows and it turns out that there's something fundamentally wrong with the installation, or that would require reinstall anyway, well, I haven't burned a license. So at this point, I'm pretty close to the end, and I'd probably have to activate this copy pretty quick. Then we also have security event logs. This relates to anything that might have been in a logon failure, for example. Successful or unsuccessful, depending on how you've configured it. Here I had an account that have failed to log on. Not really quite sure what that was. Probably something from my other domain, what I was trying to do here. So let's see what it tells me. Yeah, there's another account that was trying to log on from to this computer from a different machine, not part of the same domain, so it had an issue with that. Setup. This would relate to any time that I, for example, add an application or remove something from Server Manager. So if I add a role or remove a role, that should appear in here. So let's just pick one of these out. Okay, remember, I installed a certificate authority recently here, and so that now appears in this. Anything relating to the operating system, maybe plug-and-play items, or anything that I might have going on here in terms of services. If a service starts up or shuts down, or if there's some kind of a problem with anything, then I'll see exclamation points or red X's over here as well. And then the new one here would be the forwarded events. We'll talk more about that in more detail a little bit later on. But for the meantime, let's move on now to also taking a brief look here at the applications and services. And with applications and services, what we really get here is very verbose information that was not always available before in previous versions of Windows, or you could have gotten it some way or the other, but it might have had to require that you enter a registry hack or that you run some kind of a special command from a command line to turn on verbose logging. So now we get quite a lot more detail here in these logs than we might have had otherwise. Also, some of these logs in previous versions of Windows were also there, but they weren't included in the event viewer. And so you'd have to chase them down by opening opening up, log files and, opening them up in Notepad or something. And then that was sometimes kind of cumbersome, difficult to sort, difficult to read, sometimes quite large. This makes things an awful lot easier. For example, here's the DNS server application and services log item. And what's kind of cool about this is, first of all, this is something you should know about for exam purposes. Just know that it's there, and that you can get some DNS information out of this. Actually, quite a bit of DNS information. Oh, this is kind of interesting. Look at this one. Let's go crack this one open. Okay, a more recent version of the zone google.com was found. I don't know if you remember this, but way back when, in a previous nugget, I had created a stub zone to google.com. Remember, one of the advantages of stub zones is they automatically update themselves when there's been a change. So it identified a version change to the number, apparently, and it's identified the DNS server here at this IP address, and now it's doing a zone transfer of some new data from out of that zone. So that's kind of cool. Anyway, if you need to chase down something that's giving you a problem related to a specific service, if it has something that's listed here, definitely a good place to go to see if you're running into any problems. Let's also take a look at a couple of other things here. Why isn't that opening? There it is. One of the other ones that there is the operational logs. Remember I told you earlier that the applications and services logs that we looked at gives us somewhat verbose information about these specific services. If you want even more information, you can get extremely verbose information by going to Microsoft, Windows, and then you can go into operational logs that appear underneath each one of these various Windows components. For example, I've got a regular backup that runs here. So if I go to the backup and operational, we'll see whether or not we were able to make backups at certain times of the day. So here it made a backup at 10:46 a.m. Let's just kind of take a look at some of the details about this. If I crack this open, then I can see the event data. I can see how much data it transferred. Wow, that's quite a lot. See if I can make sense of that. That's kilobytes, megabytes. Okay, so it's like 52 gigabytes if I'm reading that right. I wish they'd put comma separators in there, but anyway, they don't. But this gives you, of course, again, pretty verbose information. Tells me where the backup was made to, what drive I was using, the number of volumes that is in use. So all different kinds of things. When it started, when it ended. That's very useful to find out. For example, if I want to know how large of a backup window I need, so that I can schedule it appropriately. See if there's... let's take a look at the warning. That would be a big one to look at. Oh, and that's a problem that I'm running into. I need to replace that hard drive because my backup target is running low on free space. So I might not have enough free space for future backups. And let me show you something kind of cool with this as well. I don't think this is going to be particularly on the exam, but it sure is useful. I can right-click on this and attach a task to this event. The key thing that I usually do with this sort of thing is I send myself an email. So I'll say, low on hard drive space, low on backup space. Okay, something like that. Or you can leave the default item there, but it's not really that intuitive. And then, since I've kind of hard-coded it to a specific item that I selected, then all of these are static information. You can also custom configure one on your own if you want to, but I'm basing this on an existing event. And then I can say start a program. It might be some kind of a cleanup program that cleans up temporary files if it's something that needs to be done there. Here in this case, on a backup drive, that wouldn't really be an issue. So what I might do instead is to send an email or display a message. If I just display a message, that requires me to be logged on to be able to see the message. That's not always the case with servers, especially headless servers. So I might send myself an email, and then I'll just fill all this stuff in, and of course enter in my SMTP server, and then that'd be pretty much be it. Now I would get an email anytime I started to run low on hard drive space for that particular item. Now, what I might want to do with that in particular is to also create a custom view. I mean, most of the information that we see there, if you take a look at this thing again, for example, is just informational items. None of that's really, red flag stuff that I need to pay a great deal of attention to all the time. And that's going to be the case with all of the events that we see. You'll have informations, warnings, or you'll have criticals. Okay, those sorts of things. What if I want to see this so that it only shows me the critical items or the warning items? What I can do with this is to create a custom view, and then I select that item, and I can say whenever it was logged, any time, or within the last 7 days, or whatever I want it to be. Let's just say, for my case, let's say the last 7 days, critical error warning items. Okay, and then what I can do is by log. So only these operational logs that are underneath the backup. Okay, and then we can choose specific event IDs. If you take a look at that, notice that they all have different event ID numbers, like 51 and so forth. Well, I'll just choose it for all of them in this case, but I could just enter in a number there as well if I want to. And then if I have a keyword that I want to look for there as well, then I can check that out as well. Okay. If I'm looking for something for specific users, maybe, for example, if it was a security event log, maybe I would want to see every time a specific user was trying to log on, or anytime a particular computer requested a resource or something like that. So those are the kinds of things you can do there. Now, notice that there's also an XML log. This is going way beyond our scope here, but what you could do is, rather than configuring all of this yourself, you could go into XML and edit the query manually. And then if you're adept at XML coding, you can add additional criteria to this. I'm pretty much okay with just a little clickety-click stuff that we have in here, so I'll just click OK. And then what I'll say is, warnings, criticals for backup. All right, and that's just an example. You can call this whatever you want to call it. Notice that this will then appear in the event viewer under custom views, and I can put this in a new folder here if I want to as well. I'm just going to, actually, let's just do that one. I'll just call it backup. Okay, and so now I'm going to put it in the backup custom view, and then we'll take a look at that custom view. And where is it? Should be right up here. But anyway, oh, there it is. So now I've got this backup item, and I'm going to look at the warnings and criticals for backup, and then there's my problems. I was running low in hard drive space. Looks like I've been running low for a few days here, so I probably got to get that resolved. And then one time I manually canceled a backup. I think I did that when we were talking about backup because I needed to show you something else, so I just canceled a backup that was running. So this gives me, a really good way to consolidate all of that and to distill it all down into only the stuff that's going to be most important to me. Now, another thing you might like about Event Viewer now is that you can also collect events from other computers. This is very handy because instead of having to open up a remote desktop connection to, say, Nugget 2, every time I wanted to look at the event logs, then I have to crack this open, go to Diagnostics and Event Viewer, and drill my way down into wherever it was I was interested in viewing. Well, it's much easier if I can just go ahead and have this thing forward these events over to me over on my side of things over here. The computer that I'm sitting at could be a Windows Vista, a Windows Server 2008, or a Windows Server 2003 R2 computer, as well, of course, as Windows 7. So as long as I'm sitting at one of those current Windows clients here, I can pull those events from that other machine without having to actually visit it or without actually having to open up a remote desktop session. So how am I going to do that? Well, here I'll tell you what I got. I've got a document that's up on nuggetlab.com. It's a PDF file for you, and it's called Collect Events from Forwarder to Collector.pdf. And this has all the instructions for you in it. But I'm going to show you how that works as well because this is something that you definitely should know about for exam purposes. Okay. Now, a couple things we'll have in mind with this. Actually, that's what I was talking about when I talk about subscriptions. Subscriptions is known as forwarded events or subscriptions. You'll see them under both terms. So when it comes to event forwarding, you should know some terms as we get started. Number one, there's the forwarder. This is the one that actually has the events on it. It has, the applications that I'm trying to track that keep crashing, for example. Or I want to keep track of the services that keep failing over on that machine or something like that. So this is the forwarder that has the information I want. The collector is the machine that's, of course, collecting that information. With event forwarding, we can use HTTP. Now what happens is the forwarder and the collector will have that information transmitted over the wire using the HTTP protocol. And in case that sounds insecure to you, let me inform you that this is also actually encrypted. Okay, so even though it's just plain HTTP, it is encrypted. If you want additional encryption, you can specify HTTPS, and then you'll kind of have encryption on top of encryption. And then we'll have firewall settings that need to be opened up as well in order to be able to allow this exchange to take place. By the way, the firewall settings that are opened up only apply on work or domain connections. That never opens those up on a public connection. So that's kind of handy to know about for security purposes. And then you'll have various services here that will have to be enabled on both of the machines as well. And we'll take a look at what those services are. But now let's go ahead and configure this for event collection. And to do that, actually, I need to start over here. I'm going to go to the forwarding computer first. And when I go into the forwarding computer, I need to go to an administrative command prompt. Right-click here. I'll just choose Run as Administrator, like you've seen me do many times before. And I need to do a WinRM, okay, quick config. Did I type that right? Yes, quick config. What this does is it goes ahead and sets up listener ports so that I can work with this machine, okay, for that purpose. So I type that in, and you can see right here it is going to open up a listener on HTTP to be able to accept the request necessary. So, do I want to make these changes? I'm going to say yes, and it will then enable that firewall change. Next, I need to add the DC Nugget 1 computer, which is my collector, to the event log readers security group over here on this computer. Okay. Now I can do that a couple of different ways. You can use the UI for that, for example, if you want to, or I can do it from a command line. I'll just do it that way since that's kind of cool. So net local group, and then event log readers in quotes because it's got spaces in it, and then I'll enter in the name of the collector, which would be let's see, DC Nugget 1 $. Make sure you put the $sign at the end of that, /add, and then let's see, I think I got it. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Now I've got DC Nugget 1 added into that appropriate security group. And that's mostly what I need to do over here on Nugget 2. Now I'm going to do the rest of the work over here on this other machine. And here I also need to go to an administrative command prompt, and I'm going to run as administrator again. And then I need to type in WEC-util, which is the Windows Event Collector utility, QC, for a quick config there as well. And then I'll just press enter. This says the startup service node will be changed to delay start. Would you like to proceed? Yes or no? I'm going to go ahead and say yes, and press enter. Okay. Now we've successfully started up that service. And then there's another service that you could start here, and that would be the Windows Remote Management Service. You can just go to the console to start that if you want to. That one also can be started as a delayed start. On Windows Server 2008, you shouldn't have to do that because that is the default property of that particular service. If you wanted to collect or work with a Vista machine, however, for example, then you would need to go ahead and start that service as a delayed start from a Vista computer. So let's just actually go ahead and confirm that, just so you can see it, a couple of different ways. You can do this from the command line, like I showed you, or you can go down to services here. And if we go down to Windows, should be an event collector right here. And you can see here that this service is started automatic with a delayed start. And then the other one was the remote management, that one right there. It also should be started automatic with a delayed start. So there they are. All right, now let me go back up here to my subscriptions, where I've collapsed some things a little bit to give ourselves a little bit more room. And what I need to do now is to actually create a subscription. So I right-click here to choose Create Subscription. This will set up the relationship between the collector and the forwarder so that I can have my events exchanged. And then I'm just going to enter in a subscription name. Let's just say I'm only interested in the criticals and warnings from Nugget 2. And then I can put the destination log, some other log if I want to, but I recommend you keep them in forwarded events so that you can isolate your events from the other events that occur on this local machine. Then you can make them collector initiated, which means that the collector machine, the one we're looking at right now, is going to reach out and touch the forwarding computer to see if there's any events that can be forwarded. Or it can be source computer initiated, which means that Nugget 2 will initiate the communication instead. Here we'll select computers. I'm just going to leave it at this one, and I'll add the domain computers, and of course that's going to be Nugget 2, and there it is. And now I can also test this. If this tests okay, then everything should be just fine, and our connectivity test succeeded. Okay, great. So now I'll click OK there, and that'll pretty much be it. Then I can choose the selected events that I want to look for. So I'll click on that item. Ooh, what happened there? Everything kind of disappeared. Oh, there it goes. I don't know what happened there, folks. Everything just kind of disappeared for a moment. Anyway, I can say logged, whatever. At any time, I'll say that, critical error, warning, that sort of thing. And I'll choose the event logs for, how about just the Windows event logs for applications? Okay. So then what I can also do is again, choose an event source if I want to. I'm not interested. I'm just going to choose all of them for the time being. We'll just leave them all in there. But otherwise, if you're going to be very granular about what specific ones you want, you can do that as well. And then you saw the other stuff here that I selected at a previous point in time as well. So then once I've done that, I can also choose the Advanced button to make some additional selections. So as I click on that, we see here that we can choose which kind of an account to use to collect the events. I'm going to leave it at the machine account because I've already added the computer account, if you recall, to the, what group was that I added it to? The Event Log Readers security group. Remember, I did that from the command line. If I want it to be a specific user account, then I can do that, but then I also have to enter in the username and password here, and I also have to make sure that that specific account is also added to the Event Log Readers security group over there. I'm just going to leave it at machine account, and we'll leave it it at that. Then there's the event delivery optimization. Normal, minimize bandwidth, and minimize latency. Let's address these. And what happens with the normal item here is that it's going to be the collector that will initiate the communication with the forwarder to see if there are any new events. And then it will download 5 events at a time. And if 15 minutes go by, then it's just going to download all available events. Okay, so that's the way the normal one works. And then I can also minimize bandwidth. This is very useful, of course, across slow WAN links where I don't want to consume too much bandwidth. What happens here is it's going to use the push delivery mode where the forwarding computer is going to contact the collecting computer, and it will only forward events every 6 hours. So obviously that will minimize the bandwidth. You can also minimize the latency if you want to be very up to date. If you don't have bandwidth issues or anything like that, then what's going to happen is it'll use the push delivery mode so that, again, the forwarding computer will contact the collecting computer, and it will do so every 30 seconds. And then here also is where we chose the protocol. Remember, HTTP is the default, but you can also, of course, choose HTTPS. You have to make sure that that port is also open then, port 443, to support HTTPS if that's what you want to use. So I think I've configured everything properly. Now we'll just go ahead and click OK. And we see an event log message here on Event Viewer. Now, what this is telling us is that we, again, need to make the WinRM firewall exception. This would have been the same thing. I could have done the same thing here by typing in advance the WECUtil QC command that you saw me type over on the forwarder. I'm going to go ahead and say yes here, but that's basically what that's going to do. Let me just show you a quick tip here. You can also, again, confirm connectivity here. We already tested it once, but let's just confirm it again from a command line using the WinRM command ID, and then remote, and then the name of the forwarder, which would be nugget2.nuggetlab.com. You do have to do this using a fully qualified domain name. Oops, I guess I better type the whole thing in there. WinRM, left the M off the end there. And you do have to type in the fully qualified domain name because it performs an authentication that can only happen against the FQDN and not a flat namespace. Anyway, what you want to do is to get any kind of response, basically, besides an error. If you get this kind of information, then you're good. Now let's go back over to Nugget 2 and also confirm from that side of the connection. And for this one, again, I'll go to an administrative command prompt. And then I'll type in another command here, WinRM enumerate. Okay? And this is going to identify key information about the collector computer, but it's going to be WinRM /config/listener. Okay, and I'll press enter there. And this just, again, basically I'm just looking for anything that's not some kind of an error that shows up into this thing. Okay. Also notice that there's no spaces between these slashes, all right, just so you keep that in mind. All right, so that's pretty much it for that part of it. Now, let me take a look at something else here that I need to address, and that would be that if I go back into my subscription and go to its properties, notice that if we go down to the advanced button again, that here we have the minimize latency item, and I want to choose a custom item here instead because maybe I want to forward events even more quickly. So what I'll do with this then is I'll just go into this and I'll go, let me see, I'll type in WECUtil, okay, SS, and then the name of the subscription, which I always forget what I typed it here. Let's call it criticals and warnings from Nugget 2. I should have made it a shorter name. And then /CM:/custom. Okay? And now it's going to change that to a custom type of delivery there for the delivery optimization. Now I also want to do a WECUtil, okay, SS, and then again the name of the subscription. Okay, so criticals and warnings from Nugget 2. And then I want to do an interval of 6,000 milliseconds, let's say. And that would be, 6 seconds. So we'll type that in there and press exit. And now I've changed the interval there to be every 6 seconds. Now, normally you don't need to make it quite that up to date. The reason why I've done it here is because I'm going to be a little impatient since I'm trying to demonstrate stuff, and I want to show you stuff pretty much as quickly as I can. Now I want to go to my Nugget 2 computer, and I've downloaded and copied over here the BadApp32 application. This is an application that Microsoft actually wrote that would cause applications to deliberately crash. It's kind of fun. There's a 32-bit version, which is what I'm running here, and there's also a 16-bit version. The 16-bit version has sound, but for some reason a 32-bit one doesn't. But anyway, all this is designed to do is to crash, and I'm running this on purpose so that it will register an event in the event log. Okay, and we'll see here in just a moment that it'll crash, and I'll get an hourglass here. Okay, it's not looking so good, right? So I'm going to close the program. I'm not going to check online for a solution because I know that this was supposed to have crashed. So I'll just close the program now, and I'm going to go into my event viewer. And then as I refresh the screen here, we actually see this item. Okay, and it did crash. It was bad app 32 that did crash. Now, what I want to happen is I want this to be forwarded over to DC Nugget 1. Okay, I don't want to have to open up a remote desktop connection every time, or open up a custom console and connect to another computer. You can right-click here and you can connect to other machines and stuff like that. I don't want to really do that. So I'm gonna hopefully see that this has made its way over here to this other machine. Now, where do I find that? Okay, because here's the subscription itself. But where is actually the forwarded event? Remember, I told you wanted to look at the forwarded events to find that information, and voila, but there it is. So, pretty happy with the way that works right now. Alright then, let me show you one other thing here, and that is how you can initiate a subscription from the collector computer. And the way you would do that is you would go to a command line and you type in WECUtil, then a space, and then a CS, and then a name of an XML file. Now, this whole thing, by the way, is something that I would definitely keep in mind for exam purposes. This would be especially useful, for example, if I needed to collect information from a server core computer where I didn't have an interface that I could, right-click and, make other kinds of changes on. It would be something that I might need to do for a server core machine. But I would have to create my XML file, which would contain all of my subscription information. Now, in order to do that, that actually requires a little bit of effort. You have to know some things about how that syntax is going to have to appear. I've entered in a tiny URL here, and you can pause the screen if you want to write this down. But that will redirect you to this location on Microsoft's website on MSDN, and this will show you how to set up a source-initiated subscription with some sample syntax here. I think it's in here. There it is. All of this kind of stuff down here. So this gives you an idea of how to configure it, but the actual details of which are beyond our scope. But you do need to know that you can do it, and again, that it's very useful for something like a core server. Okay, now I mentioned earlier that you can use HTTP or HTTPS for your subscriptions. I'm going to go here to Properties for this subscription and go to Advanced, where we're going to see a couple of things. Number one, their custom item is now hard-coded on. And the only way to configure the custom item is through the command line that I showed you a moment ago, where we configured it for 6,000 milliseconds. Now, the other thing I want to show you is what I was just starting to talk about, and that is that I can use HTTPS, and in this case, by default, it's port 443. Now, I've configured this now on the collector side of things, and that's one of the things I need to do there, but over on the forwarder side of things, I also need to configure an inbound rule exception for that. So I'm going to create a new rule here to open up port 443. Okay? And I'll just do it by port in this case, and you've seen me in this interface before, so I'm just going to quickly go through this, and it's going to be 443. And if you wanted to be very specific, you could allow the connection only to specific hosts. I'm definitely not going to do this on a public connection or even private in this case. I am connected to a domain, so I'll just go ahead and select that option. And I'll just say open 443 for lack of a better, more creative idea. And then I'm just going to go ahead and allow that to happen. Now, the other thing I need to do is set the transport layer to HTTPS over on this side of things. So I'm going to go to a command prompt again as an administrator. And then from within this, I'm going to type winrm and then quick config and then dash transport :HTTPS. Okay, like that. All right, now it's going to go ahead and allow the listener on HTTPS connections. I'm going to allow these changes, okay, and let it go. Now, I've already kind of tested this a couple of times offline, but I want to confirm to you that this does work over HTTPS now by going to Network Monitor, and then we're going to talk more about Network Monitor in a future nugget, but for the time being, I'm just going to start a new capture, and I'm going to go ahead and start this, and then over on Nugget 2, let me make sure I get started, there it goes, and then over here on Nugget 2, I'm going to again run that little utility, my bad app utility, and give this a second to run. Then when it's completed, I'll close this up, go back over to the other server over here, and when we see the event show up here, like I said, I've already shown it a couple of other times, or run it a couple of times offline. There's the event, though, so now I can go ahead and stop this. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and take a look at that traffic. It's IP version 4 traffic between 10.10.10.70 and 72. This is the TCP traffic, and there's an SSL connection, so that's probably good enough confirmation for you there that we're using HTTPS. So just again, kind of double encryption, if you will, because it's already encrypted anyway, but now we've got double encryption to very well protect us, because you might have sensitive data that gets transmitted in these event logs as they're sent from one computer to the next. In this nugget, we took a look at monitoring event logs, and we started off with a brief overview of the events so that we could get refamiliarized with some old tried-and-true friends, such as the application event log, security event log, and the like. And then we also took a look at applications and services. Remember, this relates to just that, various applications and services, where you can identify more verbose logging information than you might have been able to see in the past. Also, we took a look specifically at things such as the DNS logs, which also appear in the DNS console, by the way. Then we took a look at custom views so that you can whittle down extraneous information and only get the most important information to your own purposes. And then we took a look at subscriptions, which allows us to forward events from one or more computers to maybe a centralized computer. That way you don't have to chase down the event logs on a number of different computers. You just collect them to your own workstation, for example. Well, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.